Are you a psychiatric private practice owner or looking at starting your own private practice and are unsure if you want to remain as a solo practice or a group practice? And this decision is hard, don't get me wrong, but in today's video I'm going to be going over why you should remain as a solo private practice and why it's better to remain as a solo private practice versus a group practice. So stay tuned. Welcome back to the channel, LifeofaPsychNP. If you are new to this channel, my name's Darty. I'm a board certified psychiatric nurse practitioner, and in this channel I go over several different topics related to nursing, nurse practitioners, and private practice owners like myself. So if you are interested in any of these topics, feel free to subscribe. Make sure you like this video because it helps me out so much with the YouTube algorithm, and follow me on Instagram at LifeofaPsychNP. So you probably clicked this video because you're interested in either starting your private practice or upgrading your private practice from a solo practice to a group practice. And congratulations, this step is huge. But at the same time, I wanted to shed light on why you might want to stay as a solo provider versus a group practice. And I'm not saying don't do it, but take your time, especially when it comes to being a solo provider and understanding all the benefits from it before deciding and jumping all in. And as you already know, I'm a group private practice owner. I've been doing it for about 3 years now, and it's been a great ride, but there are definitely some times where it felt like it was a little bumpier than it should have been. And just like with any business, you have to always take all of these things into consideration. And with there being so many pros of having your solo practice versus a group practice, and so many cons of having your solo practice versus a group practice, I wanted to shed light on the pros of being a solo private practice owner as opposed to a group private practice owner. Obviously, like I said, I love being a group private practice owner, but there's definitely a huge difference from running it solo versus as a group. And not many people have either the time, money, effort, or even wanting to do this. So I wanted to make a video on why I chose more of the cons in this video of starting your own private practice as a group practice versus a solo practice. So without further ado, let's go over my top 5 reasons why being a solo private practice owner is better than being a group private practice owner. So let's go. So the first reason why being a solo private practice owner is better than being a group private practice owner is you have complete autonomy and control of your company. So one of the biggest advantages of owning your own solo private practice is that you can have complete autonomy and control over your practice. You get to say and do what you want to do and how you want to treat people and how you want to be able to implement certain things into your practice, whether it's implementing an intake system or whether it's implementing a system where you do screeners or whatever the case is. You get to do all of these things. And as a solo private practice owner, you decide. But when it comes to having a group private practice owner, yes, you're going to be the one that owns the group, but at the same time, you want to make sure that your providers are happy. So you're doing certain things that they're okay doing. And when you're making so many different changes, especially in the beginning, not a lot of people are going to feel like it's stable because you're doing so much and you're making so many different changes, especially as you're starting to pick up and having a more patient load and having their patient load to increase. And when you go from 1 provider to 2 providers, 3 providers, 4 providers, 5 providers, and like myself at 7 providers, when I make a certain change, everyone has to be on board, because if one person isn't necessarily on board, the likelihood of them wanting to go that route and wanting to stay with your group is going to be a lot slimmer. They're not going to feel like they want to be there. And let's face it, as a psychiatric nurse practitioner, we have so many different opportunities out there where we can just leave. And that's the fortunate thing about being a psychiatric psychiatric nurse practitioner, is you have so many options. So you want to be able to be a private practice owner, but be able to be in a situation where you offer all of these things and make sure everyone's happy. But as a solo private practice owner, you don't have to worry about that, because you're just doing things for yourself and you get to make the decisions. And this is a huge thing, and some reason why I feel like it might be better, because as that solo provider, you can make these decisions. Maybe some patients might be affected, but in the long term or the larger picture, they're not going to necessarily notice it. It's just you. So you can do all the things that are going to make your life easier by implementing certain things instead of having to get everyone's approval in a group practice. So it's definitely something to think about. So the second reason why being a solo private practice owner is better than being a group private practice owner is you have greater flexibility. So very similar to kind of the reason one of your autonomy and control, but two is flexibility. Yes, you get to control and you have autonomy of how you want to be able to provide patient care, but this is a little bit different. It's why I wanted to add the reason is because of the flexibility. And the flexibility is huge, especially with how you want to be able to do certain things. You get to create your own schedule. You get to create how you want to work, how often you want to see patients, how long you want to see patients, how short you want to see patients, and you ultimately get to decide these things. But once you start to become a group practice owner, you'll start to understand, like very similar to to reason one is you have to now take into consideration everybody else. For example, when you want to take time off or how long you want to see patients, you have to take into consideration everybody else, your actual person that's going to be with you or the people that are going to be with you, the other NPs. You have to take in consideration the time you want off, because now you have to offload some of your patients to them, and now they're going to get busier, and it's just going to be more of a nightmare for them, or they're not going to necessarily feel as involved or wanting to see all those type of patients because you're gone for that particular time. And then same thing when you're a private practice owner. As a solo practice owner, you can see them however long or short you want to see them. So in your schedule, you'll be able to plot that out. But as a group practice owner, you don't necessarily have as much flexibility, because now you're gonna take on that the front desk have to think about, like, oh, are they doing this amount of minutes scheduled? Are they doing this amount of minutes scheduled? And it's just going to be up and down, and it's just going to cause more chaos, especially within the practice. And now you're trying to balance all of these different schedules, and it can become more difficult in that sense. So it's tough, especially transitioning into that. So this is something you definitely want to think about, and I wanted to talk about early on, because even though it seems very minute, but it's a huge thing, especially when it comes to just that overall flexibility for yourself. And that's the reason why many people go into their own private practices, because they want that flexibility. But now that you've added multiple people, multiple providers, that flexibility is going to be definitely going to decrease, because now you have to take into consideration everyone else's kind of interests, everyone else's kind of ability to be able to practice, and just how you want to be able to schedule them out, so to speak. So yeah, it's something you have to think about for sure. Third reason why being a solo private practice owner is better compared to being a group private practice owner is you have higher earning potential. Yes, you can say both ways, where you have a higher earning potential as a group versus higher earning potential as an individual. And when you think about all of these things, I think it's a lot easier for you to have a higher earning potential in the beginning as a solo private practice owner, because everything is going into your pocket. Yes, you have to pay all the different expenses and you pay all these different things, but for the most part, majority of it is going to your pocket, because you're not paying anyone else for their services. So if there's a group private practice owner, whether you're paying salary or whether you're paying them a split, you're gonna have to be able to pay them for their services. Yes, a lot of it is like that passive income, but at the same time, it's more difficult, especially early on. And when you're at 2-3 providers, including yourself, the income potential isn't there, because you're paying everyone else out and you're not necessarily having as much to say into it. Because when you get more providers, that means you need more staff and you need more help and you need more resources in order for you to be able to help them out, versus as a solo, where you can technically do everything yourself. You don't necessarily need the staff, you don't necessarily need all of these different things in place in order for you to run. But now as you have 2, 3, 4, 5 providers, you need all of these things into place in order for you to function and run efficiently. So the earning potential is decreased a lot more until you get to like the 5, 6, 7 income or provider route, that's where you start to build more momentum and gaining more capital. But in the beginning, a lot of it is going to be in the red unless you're doing things very, very properly. But at the same time, it's a learning curve for all of us. So a lot of those chances are going to decrease because of how many people you need to be able to pay out, and sometimes you have to pay them out before they even get reimbursed from the insurance companies. And it's just so many different things that you have to think about. And so that's why I say earnings potential is higher, especially as an individual practice owner. So the fourth reason why I think being a solo private practice owner is better compared to being a group practice owner is lower overhead costs. And this is a huge one. Having lower overhead costs is going to be the determining factor of how much money you can potentially make. And I know I kind of alluded to this in number 3, but this is a huge thing because all the overhead costs of being a solo private practice is way lower compared to being a group private practice. And now I mentioned about being able to think about all the costs. Now think about you as an individual, and now think about being a group private practice owner. So you're going from you just having one office space now to having 3 or 4 depending on how many providers you have. And now you're thinking about, okay, how am I going to support all these providers, because many of these providers don't want to do the back end work like you did as a solo practice. So they're not going to make the phone calls to remind patients. They're not going to make phone calls that are calling the patients back to set up their appointment. They're not going to be doing any of those things. So you have to hire staff. And when you have 2 or 3, hiring a staff is going to be great, maybe 1, but you're going to look at it and be like, okay, now I need 2, or now maybe I need 3. And then especially as your team grows, and then not only are you thinking about that, now you're paying for the EMR, you're maybe paying for their collaborative physician, you're maybe paying for all the other tools that they're going to need, especially for them to function appropriately. And those overhead costs go from very minimal, especially as a solo practice, now being a lot higher compared to being in a group practice, because you need to offer support. Because in many roles, especially in many positions, they're going to have that support, whether it's from the front desk or their collaborative physician, and their owners are going to pay for all of the other things. You don't want to go into a situation, oh yeah, you have to pay for everything and I still get a cut. No, no, no. It's not like that. You still have to pay for those things. And like I said, early on, you're going to be struggling, and people don't necessarily know this. They think like, oh, this provider, because I'm making the X amount of money, now this provider is going to be able to make me X amount of money. No, you have to pay for all of these things up front. And it becomes very daunting. So that's definitely something to think about. Fifth and final reason why being a solo private practice owner is better compared to being a group private practice owner is you get to offer more personalized care. So this is a huge one. I know I talk about being able to have more flexibility and more autonomy in the care that you provide, but this is a even larger scale, and I wanted to expand more on it because this is huge. Because when you look at it as a solo private practice owner, you can implement certain things and provide a certain amount of care depending on how you want to do things, because you understand who you are as a provider, what your specialty is, what your deficiencies are, and how you can maximize your specialty areas. And when you're hiring other people, you don't necessarily know what they're good at versus what they're bad at. And when you know that you can provide personalized care based off of a holistic model or based off of just your knowledge base, then you understand that you can do all of these things, whether your specialty is in being able to provide like addictions type of care, or perinatal, or women's health, or men's health. When it comes to just your own private practice, you can offer those things, and you can make a specialized offer and be able to kind of niche down. But when you're a group private practice owner, you have to understand that they might not be good at those things when you're hiring them, and now you have to teach them, and now you have to go over all of these things, and it just adds more to your plate. And maybe that personalized care that you provided, especially in the very beginning of why you're doing so well, your next provider might not have that, or the next provider might not have that. And now that whole model that you're teaching or you're preaching or you're being able to kind of advertise to the community, you're not able to do that. And that's a huge limitation, especially if that's the thing that made your practice grow even more compared to the one down the street. So it's something where people don't necessarily understand. And for me, I love being able to educate and being able to do certain things, especially geared towards addictions and geared towards ADHD and geared towards like mood disorders. And I absolutely love that part of things. But when I started out, is what the reason why I grew, and once I grew into like 3-4 providers, yes, the first 2 I were able to teach. I was able to kind of converse with them, educate them, and had enough time to do that. But when I went to the 4th, 5th, 6th provider, that's where it started. I've had limited time with each of them, so they're not necessarily doing that specialization of those type of treatment options compared to when I was doing prior to having this group practice. And that's something we kind of have to look at and just have that generalized, and making sure that we hire people that are particulars and specialists in certain areas, but you don't have that opportunity to do that all the time. And that's where the limitations in terms of having that personalized care is going to be limited. So it's definitely something to think about, especially as you're growing, because yes, it's great that you offer these niche certain treatment options, but in the long run, when it comes to other people, they might not have that same skill set to do so. And now you're just teaching, educating, and spending so much time in being able to teach them these things that it takes away from other things, or seeing patients, or being able to grow your business or scale your business. And it just can become more of a headache in the long term, and that limiting the amount of money you make, then limiting the amount of flexibility you have, and then increasing more overhead costs, and so many different things. And ultimately it comes down to that, especially having a group practice versus a solo practice. Yeah, there's a lot, definitely a lot, but I'd rather shed light on it now, especially before you get into the thick of things and you start to realize that you're in over your head. Now you've hired someone, and then now you have to think about either firing them or getting a loan or being able to pull from your savings just to be able to afford them. And there's so many different pros and cons, and the whole point of this video is just to kind of inform you of all the potential consequences that can come up, but at the same time, I shouldn't have said consequence, barriers that can come up, but there's always solutions to being able to improve or reduce the barriers. So it's something that you can always think of. I'll definitely make a video about the pros of having a group private practice versus an individual private practice, but I wanted to shed light mostly on the cons today, just so it can kind of get your wheels turning, just so you understand the full just the full thing of having a group versus solo. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I was able to share more information and give you more information about this, so you're able to think about all the different opportunities out there. And I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope everyone's safe, and thank you for sticking with me this long. Definitely don't forget to like this video and follow me on Instagram at LifeofaPsychNP. Have a wonderful day. Bye.